Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. My special guest today is Professor Marandi. He is a professor at Tehran University in Iran. Welcome back, Professor Marandi.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.
So there's a lot happening right now with the Trump administration and with Iran. Donald Trump said recently that he is trying to make a deal with Iran. Now, this is after he threatened Iran that if they didn't have this agreement, I guess in reference to the nuclear arms, that it could be possible that there would be a war. Then he decided to back away from that and basically said to Benjamin Netanyahu, no, I don't agree with you striking Iran's nuclear facilities. What do you think is happening here? And do you think that there's going to be some type of a deal with Trump and Iran, especially when it concerns the nuclear facilities?
It's difficult to say what will happen. When you look at everything that Trump is doing, he's constantly shifting his position. He's constantly zigzagging. And for example, when you look at what's going on in Ukraine, you really can't be sure where he's going to take the Ukraine file tomorrow. When you look at Gaza, I mean, he came to power pretending to be a man of peace, and he imposed a ceasefire literally the day before he became the president. Yet soon afterwards, he called for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. And of course, with regards to the trade war, I think people in the United States are feeling that more than anywhere else. He's been saying different things to different people on different days, and people around him are saying contradictory things. The same is true with Iran. It's very difficult to understand what he wants and where he wants to take things. Now, the Iranians already had a nuclear deal under Obama. The Iranians are not happy with that deal because Obama constantly violated the deal, and then Trump tore up the deal, and there were no consequences for the United States. And the Iranians have always said that they have no intention to develop nuclear weapons. If Iran wanted to have nuclear weapons, they would have had these weapons many years ago. Iran's capabilities are nothing new. So what Iran wants is the United States to show respect, the United States to accept Iran's sovereignty, and for the United States to stop targeting ordinary Iranians through maximum pressure sanctions, because maximum pressure sanctions are intended to make people suffer. They're intended to kill ordinary people. It's just like the starvation siege in Gaza. The intention is to have children die of malnutrition. The intention is to have people have no food to eat and for everything to collapse. That's the objective. There's no other, it's not to give people a diet. In the case of Iran, the maximum pressure sanctions have always had the same objective. That's what they did to Syria. That's what caused the collapse in Syria. But Iran, being a far stronger country and a far more competent state, it has managed to not just survive, but it's also managed to grow. The economy is currently growing, and we see that Iranian infrastructure, as in the case of Iran's military capabilities, for example, has improved over the years. True, the sanctions have hurt the country. The sanctions have led to deaths. You have shortages of certain medicines. You have shortages of certain key supplies to make medicines. You have factories shutting down because of certain supplies couldn't get in, or certain machinery couldn't be replaced or repaired. People lose jobs, families fall apart. These things do happen. That's what the sanctions are all about. The Iranians want the Americans to stop that. Of course, the Americans won't stop that, but a nuclear deal could bring about an easing of tensions, the Americans backing off on some areas, and the Iranians giving ground on the nuclear program to a degree which doesn't fundamentally harm the program and where Iran's sovereignty is preserved. That's basically what Iran has always been willing to do. But Trump's position has been contradictory. On one occasion, on one day, Trump has said Iran has to give up its conventional weapons, it has to give up its allies across the region, and it has to dismantle its peaceful nuclear program. On another day, Trump says that all he wants is Iran not to make a nuclear weapon. And then you have people around Trump saying different things too. So it's very difficult to see where this is going to go. So far, the nuclear negotiations, from what we're hearing in the official statements, are not going poorly. But it's clear that the two sides have a far way to go, and that there are still major differences. And since Trump is unpredictable, for me at least, that means anything can happen. So if next week we had negotiations and then suddenly it came out of Washington that we're not doing this anymore, we're going to punish the Iranians, I would not be surprised for a moment. And then again, if next week there were negotiations and afterwards Trump said things are going fantastic, things are wonderful, I'm the best, I wouldn't be surprised with that either. The Iranian position, though, I think is predictable, and I think the Americans know what it's going to be. They will not negotiate their conventional weapons capabilities. They won't negotiate their alliances across the region, whether Palestinian or Lebanese or anyone else, or Ansarullah. That's not going to happen, or in Iraq. But with regards to the nuclear program, the Iran said, sure, if you want to have assurances that Iran is not going to develop a nuclear weapon, we can do that. That's doable. And we have to remember that Iran has negotiated with multiple administrations in the United States over its nuclear program already. So 3 years ago, during the previous presidency of Mr. Raisi, Dr. Bagheri, who was head of the nuclear file, he negotiated for many weeks in Vienna. I was there. I was a media advisor. They almost had an agreement. The Europeans were satisfied. The Iranians were satisfied. The Russians and the Chinese were satisfied. And Biden decided not to take that last step. We had the JCPOA in 2015. I was there too as a media advisor again to Dr. Zarif, the foreign minister at that time. And we had a nuclear deal, which Obama literally, on the day the deal was signed, he began to violate the deal. The Treasury imposed new sanctions, and it just continued to get worse after that. So Iran has a lot of experience, and I don't think it's very difficult for the Iranians to find a solution that would be adequate for Trump if that's simply what he wants, Iran not to have a nuclear weapon. But historically speaking, the problem between Iran and the United States has never been about the nuclear program. It's never been about human rights. It's never been about terrorism or anything like that. If anyone has been terrorizing the others, the United States that's been terrorizing Iranians and people across the region for decades. If it's human rights, the United States has been slaughtering across the board. We see Gaza, but Gaza's been going on for decades. The maximum pressure sanctions, U.S. support for Saddam Hussein, then the U.S. support turning against Saddam Hussein. I mean, if it's human rights and if it's the issue is Israel, and that is that the United States, its policy across West Asia and North Africa is founded upon the demands of the Israeli regime. even though those demands are usually, if not always, uh, in conflict with the interests of the United States, uh, the United States will still pursue them. So the Israeli regime is a burden, really, for the United States. It's a weight that that holds the United States back. It hurts the United States. It's detrimental to the United States. But in any case, U.S. objectives in our region, whether it's the destruction of Syria through years of dirty war, or whether it's the invasion of Iraq, it's all about Israel and the demands of Israel, and to make sure that countries around Israel are weak and broken, and U.S. policy towards Iran falls within that category. So but I don't believe there will be war. If the talks collapse, there could be uh, violence. There could be Israeli strikes with U.S. support. There could be U.S. strikes, but a few jets. Israel cannot do much against Iran on its own. The United States can do some damage with its B-52s, but those and B-2s, but they would be very vulnerable. They'd have to come all the way from Diego Garcia. And Iran has a very powerful air defense, and it's been working and it's been strengthening all of its capabilities over the last few months significantly. And Iran's counter attack would be very significant. I think the United States would be on the losing end. It wouldn't be good for the United States if there's a military exchange, and of course for Israel it would be catastrophic. But that's different from a war. A war means the United States bringing in like 1.5 million people, soldiers. That's war, and they just can't do it. No one is going to host them. They don't have that sort of money or that capability anymore. This is not the 1990s. This is not 2003. The world is different. Iran is different, and the United States is different. So I don't see the United States being capable of waging war against Iran in that sense. There could be military conflict, and as I said, it would be a loss to the United States and Israel. But you may say, well, if it would be a loss to the United States, why would they do it? And I would respond that, first of all, as I said earlier, the United States does what Israel wants. And Israel is not pursuing its own interests. The Israeli regime is pursuing Netanyahu's interests. In my opinion, the whole 19 months or so of genocide the big loser has been the Israeli regime and its supporters, because it's been delegitimized, it's now despised across the world. This regime can't last. However, Netanyahu, in order to remain in power, in order to stay prime minister and stay out of jail, he needs crisis after crisis. And that's why he continued Gaza. That's why he went into Lebanon. He began the war in Lebanon. That's why we had Syria. That's why he had strikes against Iran. He needs crises so that his coalition will remain intact. So basically, what Netanyahu is doing is he's sacrificing the United States, but he's also sacrificing the Israeli regime.
I can see that absolutely. All of this makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad to hear you say that you don't think there will be war, because I think that's what a lot of people have been concerned about. You're correct, though. People's opinions about Israel are changing. There was a new poll here in the U.S. that showed the majority of Americans no longer support Israel. So people's eyes have definitely been opened. Now, you're in China right now. I want to get your perspective about this, because how are things in China? Like, what is the sentiment among people there with everything that's happening in the Middle East? Because I know a lot of times we hear like China weigh in when it comes to geopolitics with, Russia, because obviously they're part of BRICS. But I haven't really heard them explain or describe how they feel about what is happening in the Middle East. And who do you think they would be more likely to support, Israel or Iran?
Well, just to remind your viewers that I don't believe there will be war, but that doesn't mean there won't be some sort of military conflict. But war in the sense that what we saw in Afghanistan and Iraq and so on, I don't believe the United States is capable of that. And it shows no sign of moving in that direction, because if it wants war, it has to start bringing in people from across the world, not 50,000, 100,000, 200,000, 300,000. For Iraq, which was much smaller and much weaker than Iran is today, I think the United States had 650,000 or so, and they had 100,000 coalition partners. For Iran, that they'd have to have 1.5 million, I guess, at least. I just don't see that happening. It would take half a year just to bring these people in. But China actually is, Sabrina, it's very interesting. The dirty war in Ukraine, just one of its effects is that the United States has inadvertently brought Russia and Iran very much closer to each other. So before the war in Ukraine, the Russians were always cautious about Iran because they were afraid of the wrath of Washington. But after the United States and the Europeans sanctioned Russia, they no longer care. And they increasingly needed Iran. So the relationship between Iran and Russia began to grow at a astonishing pace. What Trump has done, what Netanyahu has done, is that he's turned. I mean, you say that public opinion is turning, and I've seen those polls. In Russia, China, and other places that I visited repeatedly. I've been to Russia a number of times, 3-4 times, I think, since the genocide began, and I've been to China a number of times, and I've been to a number of different cities. The mood in China and Russia has changed dramatically. People are hostile towards Israel. It's much worse for the Israeli regime than the poll numbers in the United States. But also, the harm that this has done to the United States is enormous, because the United States, which always pretended to be the standard bearer of human rights, and no one believes that anymore. The Chinese look at what's going on in Gaza in shock. But more recently, what Trump has done is, in a certain way, I don't mean in a moral way. Gaza is unbelievable. It's the most immoral thing perhaps in the last few hundred years. There have been greater crimes, but in the past we've never seen it being carried out in front of the global audience day and night shamelessly.
Right.
That's what makes it so unprecedented. But what the United States has done is that it has made China change dramatically. And for those who know China well, they know that the Chinese, it's a huge country, obviously, huge population. When they want to change, they're like a super tanker. When they want to change, it's very, very, very slow. And so for years, the Iranians, for example, and the Chinese have been cooperating. But Chinese policy has always been, if it's been tilting away from the United States and perhaps tilting towards more closer towards Iran, as an example, it's been very slow. But the tariff war has mobilized the country. It has turned the country against the United States, and the relationship between China and Iran has evolved very swiftly. Sort of, remember what I was saying about the war in Ukraine. So the war in Ukraine changed the Iran-Russian relationship dramatically. The trade war has done the same thing between Iran and China in a different way, but still the change has been enormous. And of course, this is just the Iran-China relationship. You can gauge how this affects Chinese relations with other countries, especially since the United States has been targeting everyone in the trade war, as you know better than I. So the mood towards it is very sympathetic to the Palestinian people, from what I've been hearing across the board. I've been to um, Chengdu, I've been to, over the past few months, Chongqing, I've been to uh, Beijing, Shanghai, and wherever you speak to people, and you hear people explain about their classes, their students, their classmates, Guangzhou. It's all, you hear the same story. People are, the overwhelming majority despise the Israeli regime, and now with regards to the United States, the mood has shifted towards the United States significantly again because of the trade war. And we just saw the Iranian foreign minister come in, had very good talks with the Chinese. They made some key decisions, and apparently the Iranian president will be traveling to China in the somewhat near future. So the United States is like the catalyst. Trump is like the catalyst. The United States is the catalyst that brings the world together, minus the United States.
It's almost as if the US has basically become, or is still becoming, isolationist.
Yes, and it's helping other countries to come together to resist the United States. It's not as if it's even trying to, it's as if it's actively, it couldn't have been done better. If they plan to bring, for example, Iran and China together, it couldn't have been done better. They've done a fantastic job, if that was the intention. And you can think of all sorts of examples. I'm just saying this as an Iranian who's in China and who's been speaking to the Chinese about Gaza and about the tariff war. It's just amazing what Trump has done. It's amazing what how blind the United States is towards the new reality.
How do people in China feel about Gaza? Are they shocked?
Yeah, again, this is anecdotal, but in all those cities that I've named, that I've been to over the past few months, everyone who I speak to, and these are like university professors, these are university students, these are researchers, research institutions, they all say that before the genocide began, that most people really didn't, Gaza and Palestine wasn't even on their radar. There were those who supported the Palestinians and those who supported the Israelis, and most people who knew something about what was going on thought that this was a fight over land and something very far off. And after the genocide began, the sympathy for the Palestinians began to grow, and antagonistic views towards Israel also grew. And as time went on, it became much more one-sided and entrenched, and the hostility became much more evident. And again, there are still, it's not complete. The Israeli regime has its own lobbyists here, it has its supporters here, but overwhelmingly, from what I've been hearing from different people from different walks of life in different cities, is that the Palestinians are people support them, and the Israelis are despised.
So that seems to be the growing sentiment across the world, not just the United States. Do you think that when you look at what Benjamin Netanyahu has been doing, and I say not just Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel, even within its creation, it's really important that I stress that, because I have noticed some people who are criticizing the genocide in Gaza, either won't say genocide or they're blaming it all on Benjamin Netanyahu. They won't say Israel. I've noticed this. Bernie Sanders is a perfect example. He will criticize what is happening in Gaza and he says that it's wrong, but he always points his finger at Benjamin Netanyahu. He will not say Israel, that Israel, even within its own creation, was meant to take over the rest of the land. It was meant to push the Palestinian people out. He won't call out Zionism. It's these little things that I've noticed that I feel like some people are falling for. And I'm like, you guys notice what they're doing? They're saying Benjamin Netanyahu is the easy person to call out, right? Like that's the easy fall guy. It's like when we criticize the billionaires, it's easy to call out Jeff Bezos. It's harder for people to call out Larry Fink, right, who owns BlackRock. So
Well,
it's
I think they actually criticize him so that they don't have to criticize the others.
there you go. It just it's so obvious. It's like you have to call out Israel in its entirety, not just Benjamin Netanyahu, because when Benjamin Netanyahu resigns or is gone or decides not to run anymore, whoever takes his place is still going to have that same ideology. So that
It's like
is
saying it's like Nazi Germany without Hitler. They're saying
right.
it's Hitler's fault.
Right. So to me, like, what do you think happens? I am seeing videos of Israelis calling for Benjamin Netanyahu to resign. If that does happen, if he does resign, or for whatever reason he is pushed out, do you believe that he will be arrested? That he will face actual charges?
It's difficult to say. There are people who know internal Israeli politics better than I. Uh, what is clear, though, is that the divide in Israel is between the Ashkenazi Jews, who are the establishment Jews, who are the European Jews, and who are liberal, just as uh, genocidal, by the way. I mean, both sides of this divide in Israel have overwhelmingly supported the genocide and the ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Those who are opposed to the rapes, the torture, the genocide are a small minority, according to polls. These are not, claims made by different people. These are polls carried out by the Israelis. And those who follow Israel closely, they always remind people like me that you have to follow the Hebrew press, not the English press, to really know how genocidal this community of people have become. But the divide between the Ashkenazis and the rising religious Zionists who are from the rest of, from Northern Africa to a large extent, West Asia, other parts of Africa, uh, the divide between them is very enormous, and it's become very dangerous. And we have, I think, right up to now, at least two former prime ministers talking about the potential for civil war and military conflict between the two sides. So the divide in Israel is enormous, and it's not about Gaza, it's not about Palestine, but it's about what Israel is. Is it sort of like the United States, but I think more, at least for the time being, uh, more radical than the United States. You see the supporters of Trump and the opponents of Trump. You know this much better than I. How deep the divide is in Palestine and Israel. It's the same thing. It's these European liberals again. They're Zionists. They're part of the whole subjugation and expulsion of the Palestinian uh, population, the native population, and those who are religious Zionists and who want Israel or Palestine to be a different country, a different entity than what these liberals envisaged and how it was for them for the last few decades. So there are huge internal issues, and Netanyahu himself is actually secular, but his coalition is very religious, and he is dependent on that coalition to remain in power. So if that coalition dumps him, uh, he will probably go to jail. That's my understanding. Again, there are people who know this better than I, and as I understand it, he will probably go to jail as a result. But those extremists, they're all extreme, but those religious extremist Zionists, they need him because he's there. Because Netanyahu is very, he's a, how evil as he is, he's a very brilliant politician, and he's been able to remain in power for a couple of decades. So they need him. And some say that if Netanyahu goes, actually, the chances for civil war inside the land, inside what is called Israel, the chances would increase dramatically.
Wow. Interesting. Well, over the weekend, this was interesting as well. This has been making the rounds on social media. It appears there was an explosion in Iran. I want to talk a little bit about this because I think, some people are taking this and they're saying it was Israel. We don't know. It doesn't sound that way. It says a massive explosion at an Iranian port, possibly linked to missile fuel, kills 25, injures some 800. If we can talk a little bit about what happened here, was this an attack here from Israel, or was this just, I would say, like a technical failure? What do you think is happening here at this port?
Well, this actually, when you very kindly invited me to appear on your show, I was sort of wondering whether I should, because last night I really didn't sleep. I was up because here it's 4.5 hours ahead of Tehran, and so I was, while the news was still being, the news was coming out from Iran, from Iranian news agencies and websites and Telegram channels and so on. At 10, 11, 12 p.m., I was up till 4:30 just trying to, keep up with the news. I couldn't sleep. So it's very upsetting to see what's happened. And there will always be, I don't like saying this conspiracy theory because how they use these terms against anyone who critiques. But in any case, for example, when President Raisi was killed last year in the helicopter crash, some believe that he was assassinated.
That was me.
I don't think. I don't think so. I mean, I saw the footage. There was a lot of fog. And a lot of people, they continue to believe this. And I'm not saying he wasn't. I'm just saying that, so a lot of Iranians agree with you, or if that's how you still believe. It's not like, I'm not, it's not just, there are many people who would say, no, so-and-so is talking nonsense. But there was very heavy fog. When the helicopter took off, skies were clear. Then it went into this place where it was very heavy fog. There were 3 helicopters. They were supposed to pull up. The pilot of this helicopter told the other 2 to pull up. He also pulled up, but apparently he was slow. Apparently the helicopter was a bit too heavy for a host of reasons that we've been told. But all that aside, the helicopter didn't explode. From what I've seen in the footage, the back of the helicopter struck the side of a mountain and then it fell. And then some people in the helicopter were alive for a few hours, so for 2-3 hours, and then they died. They actually spoke on phones as they were gradually dying. One of them, at least. So, but you still have this. Was he martyred as a result? Martyr in the sense that he was working for the people. Was he martyred in an accident, or was he martyred because of like some plot against? That debate still exists. I personally believe it was an accident. Again, here there are those who are going to say there was an attack, uh, but from what I'm seeing, it looks like an accident, especially because of the footage that came out just a few hours ago that showed how the fire started. At least from one camera, you can tell that there was like this small, there was a small fire or smoke, and then it began to grow. So it's still possible. Anything is possible. But these claims that the New York Times made, which are psychological warfare, that these were uh, like solid fuel for missiles. That's all nonsense because this is a civilian port, and the military, they have their own ports. They don't bring in weapons, alongside refrigerators. Like when they want to import weapons, let's say from a friendly country, they don't have boxes full of those weapons right beside, your ovens and other appliances. They have their own ports where they take in what they export or import whatever they need, and this is a civilian port. The New York Times and other Western agencies have been promoting this along with these Persian language media, which have been gloating, by the way. The Persian language media in the West, which is funded by Western governments, by the United States, they have been gloating, which is really disturbing. But anything bad that happens in Iran, it pleases them. But the New York Times and others have been trying to say that yes, like the military brought in uh, like their weapons and or like fuel, and that exploded, and that so it's the fault of the military. But the footage that's come out doesn't show that, and the port isn't used by the military anyway. So again, there is a narrative that's being pushed by the West because of its hostility towards Iran. But I think it was probably, it definitely had nothing to do with the Iranian military, but whether it was like some sort of, uh, not an attack as in like someone put a bomb there or something, or it was just incompetence and sloppiness and that sort of thing. I would imagine. I mean, right now, I think it was probably an accident because it's pretty hot in the south of Iran now. It's becoming summer. It's 40 degrees. I think it was probably an accident, uh, but it could have been something more sinister. But in any case, and actually, if you recall, I don't remember how many years ago, it was like 10, 15 years ago in Tianjin here in China, they also had a huge explosion in Tianjin, in the port in the north of China, where I don't know the real big number, but maybe 150 to 200 people died. It was much larger than this. So this could be something like that. It could have been an accident. In the case of Iran, the port was smaller. It didn't destroy the port. The port is still functioning. This is one part of the port. But I think it was probably an accident so far. I think roughly 30 people were killed almost. Maybe it'll probably increase three, four, five more. Some severely injured people will probably die. I'm just guessing. But at the moment, I think it was probably an accident.
Yeah, that's what it seems like to me. It's interesting, though, to your point, how like the New York Times took the story and just ran with it and just became that's why I was just saying to myself that like, oh my gosh, like they don't even have all the information and they just immediately just said, let's put this out there, because it's true, whoever gets that narrative out first, that's what people are more likely to believe.
I don't know if you remember this, but around 3 years ago, the New York Times did an article and they said that they had six different sources inside Iran and that the leader was on his deathbed and he was about to die. And the Western media and all, they were saying And then literally, like, I don't recall, but literally like 2 days later, he had a public uh, meeting where he was walking, speaking with people, and he, I mean, he he certainly got well very quickly. But that's the New York Times, and I have zero trust in West. If there's one thing, and I dislike Trump immensely, I think there's no doubt about that for anyone who knows me. But if there's one good thing that Trump did, is that, and I don't know if he coined the phrase, but he sure ran with it and he made it a big thing, and that is fake news. He really discredited mainstream media or legacy media in the United States. And I think that now it's much easier to point out to many people how mainstream media works. Although I feel that still among many in the West and in the United States that I know, they still can't always see that, well, if they're lying at home, they're probably lying in foreign policy too. They're more skeptical often about events at home than about what the legacy media is saying about events abroad. I feel that way, at least with regards to Iran. But I have noticed, Sabrina, this is something that I've noticed over the last 19 months, and I have lots of people who I'm in contact with from across the world because of appearing on your show and on other alternative media or on mainstream media at times. And that is that Iran has the mood or the feeling towards Iran across the world has changed dramatically. And for decades, Iran has always been seen as, that the narrative they've been pretty successful in demonizing Iran. And now I see how popular Iran has become here in China, for example, but also elsewhere. And people actually, they criticize me or they criticize Iran for like not carrying out an attack on Israel. And they keep saying, why doesn't Iran, as if like I'm a commander or something and I make decisions and I'm the one who presses some sort of button, makes a decision to strike back at the Israeli regime. But people across the world, really, many people, I'm not saying everyone, are looking to Iran as like the hope for the Palestinian people, and Iran is doing an enormous amount. The sanctions are all about Palestine. The targeting of Iran, the anti-Iranian narrative that's been going on for decades, it's all been about Palestine, and Iran continues to support Ansarullah in Yemen because they're supporting Palestine. They're doing that inside Palestine, in Iraq, in wherever there is resistance. Iran is supporting it as far as it can, and it's a lopsided war. I mean, you have the entire Western political establishment on one side, and then you have this axis of resistance on the other side. And people's expectations, I think, are not necessarily realistic. And I'm not saying Iran is a utopia. I'm not saying the axis of resistance, they're all, everything is ideal and everything, but what I am saying is that relatively speaking, people who in the past used to be very critical of Iran tell me that my views on Iran have changed. I mean, there's so many people who've said this, that my views on Iran have changed completely. And again, the United States apparently has become very good at making itself unpopular and making Iran popular, helping create strong bonds between Iran and Russia, and now strong bonds between Iran and China. Uh, there are a lot of brilliant people in U.S. government.
Professor Marandi, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Sabrina. Always a pleasure.
Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.